So my Levi's in the future could be made partly with wood.
That's correct.
Oh, this is great. This is Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine. Today we look into the future, and not too distantly into the future either. Maine is the most forested state in the nation. Our economy is so dependent on trees that a lot of us are starting to panic because paper mills have closed down. On this show before, we've been out of the woods with foresters and loggers lamenting the fact that they're losing the markets where low-grade wood used to go. You may not be aware of the research and product development that's going on right now at the University of Maine. You're almost certainly not aware of the new advanced products that can be made out of wood. You're about to find out. We're going inside the Process Development Center at the University of Maine, and we're going to find out exactly what they're making and how. Spoiler alert, if you take all those big fibers in a tree and separate them into little fibers, you can put them all back together in a lot of different ways you could barely imagine. Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine is brought to you by Hammond Lumber, Napa Auto Parts, Doors Equipment, and EBS.
My name is Michael Bilodeau. I'm the director of the Process Development Center here at the University of Maine, and we're part of the Chemical and Biological Engineering Department.
I'm sitting across the table from Mike Bilodeau. On the table, an assortment of samples. There's a small jar that looks like it belongs in a cosmetics kit. It's got a creamy substance inside that looks a little like mayonnaise. There's a thin slab of cardboard, a block of something that looks like a combination of plastic and steel, another block of something that looks like cork, a sheet of something that looks like a particle board, some paper sheets and paper bags, and a pair of blue jeans. At this point, in room 105 of the Product Development Center, I'm wondering if I'm about to be told these blue jeans are made of wood. Process Development Center. That already sounds like a boring radio show. It's like we should give this a sexier name like Hogwarts.
There we go.
So, here at Hogwarts, what's going on? I've been out with a lot of foresters lately and a lot of loggers, and I'm very interested in the forest products industry because Maine is the most forested state in the nation. When I talk about Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine, it's all happening out there in the woods.
Right.
Some of that wood we need to turn into things besides paper.
That's correct. And besides lumber.
And besides lumber, yeah. Right. To some extent, if this economy is going to go forward into the next dozen years, we have to make more things out of wood.
That's right.
And that's what you're doing.
And that's what we're working on. So our group works primarily with industrial clients. So we provide outreach services for the university. And so we are closer to commercialization than a traditional university professor, graduate student research team. And so the more the products we work on typically are closer to commercialization, have a lot of commercial interest. And so we work with companies one-on-one. Our group, we don't have teaching responsibilities, so we're able to work on a 12-month calendar, and we're able to respond to the company's requirements and requests on a timely basis.
This was a real eye-opener for me. I came over on a tour recently, a legislative tour, where we stopped in to see what was going on here, and I had no idea. I knew you were doing something.
We were up to something, right?
I didn't know that the research had gone so far as to be this close to commercialization, or in some cases is being commercialized.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Right. And traditionally, we've been doing research in pulp and paper and finding ways to make it more efficient, better, faster, cheaper, that sort of thing. But it became clear that our clients were looking for more diversification in their product line, other revenue streams, and was there anything else we could do with low-grade wood, which is what the paper industry has always relied on to make their fiber, to make into products. But now, clearly, we had to make different types of products with the decline in the demand for paper. And so we have a joint development agreement with one of the national labs, the Forest Products Lab in Madison, Wisconsin, to help commercialize cellulose nanomaterials. And
Cellulose what?
Cellulose nanomaterials. So
Okay.
if we take the tree and we break it down to its very smallest component, that's what we call cellulose nanomaterial. And so they're basic building blocks of the tree, but now we can add them to other materials and make superior composites, and in some cases, brand new products that we couldn't make before.
So trees are basically just fiber all glued together.
That's exactly right. And then we take the fibers and we reduce those by a factor of 1,000, and now we have the materials that we're working with. So we're using very, very small material, pieces of cellulose, very high surface area, and they have amazing properties in both water slurries and also in dry form. And so today I'll show you a number of first of all, how we go about producing this material, and then some of the products that we can make once that material's been manufactured.
So we can invite listeners to think outside the box as well, and stop thinking about our forest as becoming just paper,
That's
toilet
correct.
paper,
That's
lumber.
right.
It can
Right.
be a lot more. Why is wood perhaps a more superior product to work with than grasses, switchgrasses, corn, all the other stuff that we consider?
All those other plants, all plants have these basic building blocks, these cellulose nanomaterials. It's just that wood has an advantage in that the density is much higher. You can harvest it 12 months out of the year, maybe 11 with mud season.
Right.
And so it has a huge advantage in storage and shipping. So, and the state of Maine has a lot of it.
Yeah.
So you can commercially process it economically. We still can make these materials, and we've made the materials from just about any feedstock, agricultural residuals, and grasses, and canaf, and bagasse, and everything else. But the tree's a king in the world of cellulose.
Let's plug the economy into this. You talk about the low-grade wood. That's the key to what's happening in the economy right now. The loggers are having a little bit of difficulty finding markets for low-grade wood.
That's correct.
We've actually managed to salvage the industry a little bit by biomass boilers and subsidizing those because this is what the paper companies used to use. All the mills that closed down were taking this low-grade wood. High-grade can go be lumber.
That's
High-grade can be great stuff, but the low-grade's got to have a market, and we lost it.
Right. And in order to harvest the high-grade wood, it generates a lot of these residuals that, in order for the economics for the lumber to work, you have to find a home for those residuals. If you happen to own a sawmill, there has to be some place for you to get rid of that sawdust and the chips and the bark, and it has to be something that would pay to dispose of that material.
So what is all of your feedstock? And I'm talking about the sawdust from a sawmill, branches from the top of the tree that's never going to become lumber. You chip that all up. Is that all your feedstock, or is there even more than that?
We can use diseased wood. We can use damaged wood, storm-damaged wood, anything that's not marketable for lumber purposes or higher value uses can go into making nanocellulose, and we're also looking at biochemicals and biofuels and other materials, but today we'll be focusing mostly on nanocellulose.
So that's the actual physical products rather than liquid products that you can also make things out of.
Correct.
Okay, so that's what goes into these new inventions. What comes out? I'm with Mike Bilodeau at the Process Development Center in Orono. In front of me are blocks of hard stuff, blocks of soft stuff, a jar of goo, weird paper, and blue jean denim. We'll play with the new stuff next. And when you're touring around Bob Duchesne's wild Maine, looking at all those trees may someday be these. Stand by. This is Sports Radio 92.9, The Ticket. It's Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine on Sports Radio 92.9, The Ticket. We are peering into the future. If Maine is going to make less paper, then we need to make more of something else. That something else is sitting right here on the table in front of me. And this table is inside the Process Development Center at the University of Maine. Mike Bilodeau is the center director, and he's just handed me something that feels like a small sheet of cardboard. So, Mike?
Well, first we'll just go through the process of taking wood pulp. We typically start with conventional paper-making wood pulp. That's our feedstock.
So
for
what
our
is
process.
this?
So this is an example of a product that would come out of a pulp mill. I'll show you some of the bales that they ship it in. They're shipped in 500-pound bales.
It feels
and
just
it's
like
commodity.
it
It's
feels
like
a little bit like the cardboard in a cereal box.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. And if you look on the edge of the cut edge of that mat, you'll see there's tiny little fibers sticking up through there.
Yep.
And the process that we've developed takes each of those individual fibers and unravels them like you would take a piece of yarn and unravel them to threads. And it's those fibrils that we are going to isolate and make into a slurry. And so that's our feedstock.
You going to show me how you do that, or are you just going to tell me?
I'm going to show you how
do
to
you
do
get all
that.
these fibers to? Okay, you're going to show me.
We're going to show you how to get all those organized and all.
Because I'd hate to have to pull those out one by one.
There's a lot of them, right?
Yeah. Okay, so that's basically a 5-inch by 4-inch square of something that feels like cardboard.
A sample, but the bales are roughly 3 feet by 3 feet by 2 feet, and this material has been known for decades. But back in the 70s, it was first patented. Late 70s, early 80s. The problem was the process they used to make this material was very expensive, very energy intensive. And so really the breakthrough has been that we have a process that we can make this material that it uses much less energy and is scalable. So instead of just being able to make a few grams to show or to test in a lab, we can now make it in the tons per day easily. And this is a slurry of those materials.
It's a small jar, like a sample of peanut butter.
Exactly, and it's only 3% solids, 97% water, and this stuff won't come out of the jar.
So it's a paste.
So it looks like a gel or a paste,
Yeah,
and you can feel that.
Oh, geez. Yeah. It's not even really sticking to my finger.
Yeah. And
so it's 3% cellulose.
3% cellulose, and so we just basically mix this up with water, and it starts out like an oatmeal, and then we process it until it finally almost looks like a whipping cream or a mayonnaise consistency. And now all these fibrils have very high surface area. That's what's holding all the water, is that surface area for each of those fibers that have.
Yeah, I poked my finger into this, and it didn't feel like my finger got damp. So it's really clinging to that water.
It certainly wants to hold on to water, and that's really the secret for some of the applications where you want to thicken a material, but you want it to flow if you apply any shear. And so if you shear this material, it will have the viscosity of water, and as soon as the shear is removed, it thickens back up. So some folks are looking at using it in a liquid, in a slurry for a clutch, for an automobile, for instance. So you apply the shear, it flows like water. You take the shear off, and it sets up, and you can transfer power through it.
And then you could press this in almost any different shapes and do things with it.
That's the challenge for the applications developers now is how do you take advantage of this surface area? How do you take advantage of the properties of the material in existing or new processes?
Okay.
And so a couple things. When we dry this material, let's say we just left that jar open, and it would take several weeks for it to give up its water. But you end up with a material that looks like this. So this is 100% of that.
This is the same thing.
The same thing.
You're kidding.
No.
This is a heavy block. It looks to be about a half an inch thick.
And it's very tough.
It feels like a hockey puck.
Oftentimes people mistake it for a plastic.
Yeah,
very dense plastic.
That's what I would have thought it was plastic.
But the strength of all this is extremely strong.
Yeah.
I mean, it would not break. In fact, it may be used for some ballistic applications because it does absorb so much energy without shattering. And what it is all those fibrils now are aligning, and as they're drying, they're getting tighter and tighter, closer and closer together. It increases the density, and you get a very machinable material.
You could make a Humvee out of this.
And if you put that in a bucket of water, it wouldn't dissolve. Even after a month, it's still intact. So we've gone from something that's very water soluble and infinitely dilutable to now something that's it looks like a plastic.
So is the military or other manufacturers looking at this stuff saying, oh, wow, I can't wait to make something out of this?
We have several manufacturers, because the beauty of this is if this was a wear plate, for instance, the material that was worn off is non-toxic, biodegradable, wouldn't cause a problem. So for machines where there's some abrasion, these could be some wear plates or discs or sacrificial devices that then it just have a biodegradable end of life.
Should be biodegradable. It was wood.
Correct.
Still is.
It still is.
Still is.
And so chemically exactly the same as we started with the pulp.
That's amazing. You could make that out of wood.
And then if we dry the material a different way, we end up with this. And that's another 100% of this. It's just dried differently.
This is so different. This is the same stuff, but this now feels like a cork. It's an inch thick, about 2 inches long. That's what I'm holding, and it's so lightweight. And it even sounds like even sounds like balsa.
If you try to compress it, it's got good compressive strength. In fact, you could drive a vehicle on that, and it would still not compress.
All right, I got to ask, how do you treat this different from the hard stuff here to get the same?
The same material, different properties. This is air dried, so we let the water evaporate slowly, and this is freeze dried. So we actually have the water sublime, and so it maintains the same structure that is in the slurry form, and ends up with a very, very porous, low density material. Yet the bonds between those fibrils are still strong, very strong. Hydrogen bonding goes on, so you end up with a very stiff foam.
Does this stiff foam float?
This would float.
So you can make a raft out of this.
You can make a number of things. And so there's a company that spun out of the university that Revolutionary Research is the name of the company, and they're looking to make insulation from this material, from this technology. And so you can make this fireproof, you can make it waterproof, and they are in the process of scaling up that technology.
And all things considered, a lot of the things we make, build into our homes are made out of plastics and oils.
Correct.
Which burn like crazy.
Right.
Wood doesn't actually burn as well as some of the oil-based products.
Surprisingly not very flammable, and you can make this very fire retardant, so you get a 2-hour fire rating easily that you normally don't get from say the styrofoam insulation, which melts and gives off toxic fumes. This material would not do that.
We need that. We need this stuff. Let's get it in all the homes.
Right.
And this would take a lot of, this would be a big market.
This could be a big market. There are a number of markets that potentially have very high volumes. And so the estimated market size for nanocellulose in the U.S. is about 6 million tons a year, and about 30 to 40 million tons globally. And so that is a big enough market that would make a difference in the forestry.
All right.
So those are the basic material that we're making for clients for about 12 years now, but now we have the capacity to make 1 ton a day on a dry basis. And we make it available to anyone that wants to do applications development work. On our website, anybody can come and order material. We'll show you all the buckets that are going out almost on a daily basis. We can provide it in a 5-gallon bucket, and a 55-gallon drum, a 250-gallon tote, or a truckload. And so we have the scale to provide people with enough material to do some serious applications work and commercialization trials, so they can decide whether they want to build their own plant. And we've partnered with an equipment manufacturer that makes the components of our process, and they're making that available to anyone worldwide to purchase the unit and produce the material.
Of course, what we'd like to see is a lot of that manufacturing happen right here in Maine.
That's correct. And so we're working with a number of companies in Maine that are evaluating making some new products or introducing this into their existing products. And hopefully this will be a common material used for boat building, for for paper, for plastics, for food applications. There's a number of paints and coatings.
This stuff would make a good boat. It all starts with goo. You take wood, separate all the fibers into microscopic sizes that can retain incredible amounts of water. Then, depending on how you dry it or squeeze it or heat it, it turns into something as tough as steel or as lightweight as cork. The cork stuff could replace all of the oil-based insulation in homes that are way too often treated with bad chemicals to make oil less flammable. Just that alone is a bigger market than the paper mills we lost. But we can make more stuff out of this stuff, and that's next, when Mike Bilodeau continues his show and tell at the Process Development Center in Orono. This is Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine on Sports Radio 92.9, The Ticket. This is Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine, Saturday mornings at 9, Sunday mornings at 8 on Sports Radio 92.9, The Ticket. My guest this morning is Mike Bilodeau, director of the Process Development Center at the University of Maine. It is his job to make new stuff out of wood. Maine may not make as much paper as it once did, but there's a lot of other stuff we can make, like what is this?
So another product that we're looking at making is replacing sheetrock or replacing medium density fiberboard.
Mm-hmm.
They both have some issues, either end-of-life issues or the resins that are used to bind the wood. Some that contain formaldehyde and
Sulfur.
Looking out, yeah, exactly, in the landfills. And so when we take this material and simply mix it with sawdust, we can make a fiberboard that is much lighter than sheetrock. It holds a screw much better than sheetrock. Yet we can still get this, again, the same fire rating. We can get an improved strength.
It's actually lighter, too, isn't it?
Much lighter.
Feels, yeah.
I think it's about a seventh the weight, that density.
Yeah.
So now you can make larger sheets of this sheathing. We can press it in a press and replace the medium density fiberboard that's used in furniture, like in this table. We end up with the same or superior properties, and it's a much lower toxicity and actually much lower cost.
The sample I'm holding is just a rough sample. It's about 4x4 or 5x5 thereabouts, and about a half an inch thick. Again, it's light, but it's also very rough. You can smooth this out so it looks like fiberboard.
That's right. So if we press it between two plates, it ends up where we don't even need to sand it to get the finish that you would have to sand a regular fiberboard. So there's some projects on campus that are looking to scale that up, so we could either use it in interior building, potentially exterior sheathing, or for furniture and other cabinets and that sort of thing.
Okay.
Another area that we're looking at is using it in textiles.
What you're showing me is jeans, denim.
Denim jeans, exactly. So
is this all made out of wood, or is this a mix?
No, this is still a cotton denim, but in the process of producing the clothing, the articles of clothing, they're often run through several washes for these pre-washed jeans. They currently add a petroleum-based binder to stiffen the product, and then by the time they've washed it 5 times, the binder has been washed out. But they'd like to use a more biodegradable binder, and nanocellulose happens to bond to cotton very well. It improves the stiffness and then allows them to go through and do this pre-wash treatment.
Does it wash out just as well?
And then after the 5th wash, by the time the abrasion happens, it will wash out, and even if it's left in, it's still advantageous.
So my Levi's in the future could be made partly with wood.
That's correct.
Oh, this is great. Bags?
Yeah, we have a number of other products. One of them, this is a new product that we're working to develop, in part with the United Soybean Board funding. But it's to replace black plastic that's used on farms to grow fruits and vegetables. Yeah. So right now, the black plastic you see where they're growing tomatoes or strawberries, at the end of the season, they have to go back in the fields, pull up the plastic, and then dispose of the plastic.
Because it's not going to biodegrade out
Because it doesn't biodegrade forever. And that's a costly step.
Oh, yeah.
And it happens to occur at the worst time of the year when,
Yeah.
when they're busy with the harvest and everything else. And so we have used the nanocellulose to come up with a paper that's resists breaking down for at least 100 days. But then at the end of the season, it will break down.
It feels like vellum.
It's got a different feel to it,
Yeah.
and so we've got some coatings on here that help shed the water, but also are all naturally based, so they're all safe to go back into the soil. So it's sort of a soil amendment at the end of the season. The big deal is you don't have to go back and pull it up. You can just till it under, and away you go. And so we're working with a number of companies that would be able to produce this commercially, and that's another large market. Worldwide, it's about 4 million tons of black plastic used to for fruits and vegetables, because the yield improvement's so huge that it's very compelling to use.
And then once you're done with that black plastic,
what are you going to do with it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
there is no other use for it.
No,
yeah.
and it's too dirty to really
Correct.
recycle. And
Right.
It's just a waste.
Right. And so that's another product that we're currently in. We will show you some of the rolls of paper we have that we've made. So this has gone from the bench to the pilot plant now to commercial machines. And we're doing some field trials both here in Maine and in southern growing zones to give us some feedback year-round. We also have some greenhouses on campus that we're able to do some testing to make sure we have the right rate of degradation.
So what's gone wrong so far?
Well, the one thing was we needed to make this light enough so that it was cost effective. But if we don't block the light from coming through, the weeds grow up from underneath and push the paper up. So we're working on making sure that we have adequate.
It's opaque.
Opaque, right? But but in the northern climates, you want the soil to heat up.
Yeah.
So we have to let the infrared light through to heat the soil, but block the ultraviolet light that feeds the weeds. So the balance of blocking and letting through the right light is the trick.
So how many times out there in the test greenhouses did you say, whoops?
A lot.
A lot.
And that's the nature of R&D, right?
Right, exactly.
You only need it to work once. So another product that we're making for a client are bags. These would be grocery bags or shopping bags that are completely biodegradable, yet have some water resistance to them. So number one, you don't have to double bag. So as you take your produce or stuff home from the market, if it's raining out, the bag doesn't rip open. And there's also a growing movement to have food scraps separated from your regular household waste.
Very much so.
And people now use plastic bags to contain that, and that they're either not biodegradable or they're very difficult to biodegrade. So we've come up with a coating on these bags that allow you to put wet food scraps
into a paper bag.
Into the paper bag. That so this will double as a bag to take home from the store, but you can also use under your counter to put the food scraps in, and then you can either put it on the compost pile or have it picked up, and the whole bag will biodegrade along with the food.
Wow.
Another paper that we're very excited about is a paper which we would call release paper. So this happens to be a parchment, a baking paper, but it doesn't contain any silicone, so it's completely recyclable. But it's the nanocellulose that allows us to form a very thin layer on the surface to keep up the grease and keep up the materials. And
This is very thin.
very thin. But we believe this will be a replacement for poly-coated or for silicone-coated release papers, not only for baking applications, but for labels and other applications where silicone paper is used.
50 years from now, we're going to look back and say, we used to make products out of that stuff
Correct.
when we could have used this.
Right. And it's so much, I mean, now we're able to control the full all the raw materials, all produced from wood, all biodegradable, all have very low toxicity, very good environmental health and safety profile, and it's just all around a better idea.
Yeah, using oil to make plastics that never go away once you're done with them turns out to be not such a great idea.
A little costly for end of use.
And not renewable at all.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so that's a large percentage of our business now are companies that are looking to use residuals from their process, whether it be food or paper or wood, and produce packaging or products that are fully biodegradable. And that's why there's a lot of interest in this nanocellulose, because it does allow you, it gives you the ability to design products with similar or preferred or improved properties compared to what we use traditionally.
I tell you what's going through my mind constantly through this interview is I keep looking back at this little jar of 3% cellulose nanofibrils and saying, you can make all this stuff with this little jar.
Right.
That's amazing.
And that's just the stuff that we make here.
Yeah.
We've provided over more than 220 companies with samples of this material. Most of them are not in the paper business or the forest products business at all. And so we're looking at paints, inks, composites, oil and gas drilling muds, cement. The uses for the material continue to grow. Yeah. And we get requests for materials almost on a daily basis.
I do feel like I'm looking into the future right here.
This very well could be. When we take a tour of the lab, we'll show you little larger samples of this. Cause
you ready to go take that tour
I
now?
am.
Okay, let's do that. Today's episode of Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine is coming to you from the Process Development Center at the University of Maine. Director Mike Bilodeau is showing me the future of wood. Not only are these materials better than what's on the market right now, they're much better for the environment. Nowadays, we make so much stuff out of oil-based plastics that never go away, when we could be making something out of renewable, biodegradable wood that doesn't need to be treated with harmful chemicals to reduce fire hazards. Put on some safety glasses. We're headed toward the paper-making machine. You're listening to Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine on Sports Radio 92.9, The Ticket. This is Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine on Sports Radio 92.9, The Ticket. For the last 45 minutes, we've been looking at brand new products that can be made out of wood. Everything from substitutes for plastic and insulation to high-grade construction material. Now, we're heading into the Operations Center to see how it's made, inside the Process Development Center at the University of Maine. Director Mike Bilodeau is showing me around.
We're here in the what we call the stock prep area. This is our pilot machine area. We essentially have a small pulp mill and paper mill at a miniature scale.
I wonder how many people realize the University of Maine has a paper machine in here.
It's pretty well hidden. But,
yeah.
So we're able to take raw material in the back door, whether it's a log or a finished bale of pulp or some kind of grass or residual material. We can convert that into paper-making fiber and then also make the paper and coat the paper afterwards. And so this area here is where the process starts. We have examples of some bales of pulp that we've had small sheets of, and that's these wire-wrapped bales. And that's what's shipped as a commodity all over the world. So we start with that bale, we put it in a big pulper, so it's a big tank with an agitator on the bottom. We have a 100 horsepower motor to help us blend that up, and we convert it into a slurry of water and pulp that looks a lot like oatmeal. And from there we'll pump it over to our processing area, which is over this way.
Okay.
And this device here has two metal plates, two metal discs. The discs have grooves in them. We have a couple on the floor. And what we do is we pump that slurry between those discs, and one's fixed and the other's rotating. And we control the gap between them to a very tight tolerance. And what that does is as the fibers go through, the shear starts ripping the fibers apart. And that's how we can get the fibers to continue to reduce in size until we get the particle size distribution we want, that we then call nanocellulose. And we're looking at a barrel, 55-gallon drum, where we've taken old corrugated containers, we've repulped them and converted them all to nanocellulose.
Which looks like oatmeal.
Which this one looks more like it's creamier than oatmeal. It starts out as a lumpy oatmeal. Now it's like a fine grits or something. It's 3% slurry again, just like we saw before.
Oh, okay.
But now we're using old recovered old corrugated containers as our feedstock. And now we will go and make new containers with this in addition to the regular fiber.
I've got a lot of those containers in my basement. You want me to bring them over?
Bring them right over. We'll pulp them right up.
All right.
And you can see we have a number of barrels around. Each of these barrels has nanocellulose made from different feedstocks. This happened to be from the pulp, those bales of pulp.
And that's all white as opposed to the brown corrugated.
Correct, the brown corrugated. So it doesn't matter what the source of the paper is, whether it's mixed office waste, copy paper. We can make it out of tissue and towel. We can make it out of corrugated container or corn stover.
When you're taking in recycled material, let's say cardboard that has, I don't know, ink on it or contaminants of some kind, is that a problem?
No.
Okay.
That all gets ground up and gets incorporated. Some of the staples and things like that, we can use screens to screen those out. But most of the inks used now are soy-based inks, and we just blend it right in. And again, some more barrels. So we're producing this at commercial scale. We have a licensee in Western Massachusetts that makes 2 tons a day. We're designing a plant for 40 tons a day. So this is definitely going commercial scale and not just laboratory interest at this point. So once we make either we'll make a nanocellulose or regular fiber slurry, we bring that forward to these tanks. And this is becoming to look very similar to paper mills that you see all over the country.
Indeed, that's really what it is. Did this come from a paper mill?
This did from St. Regis, which was over in Bucksport years and years ago. That they donated this machine for students and to learn paper making. We brought that over here in 1987, built a building around it, and then have added on since.
Yeah, so this is a real commercial grade. It's a little old.
Yep.
But the paper machines these days tend to be bigger.
Correct.
But you can produce a lot with this.
It's a pretty flexible machine.
And you can make a lot of different papers with this. It's not just like newsprint.
That's right. Because it's a pilot machine, we've built in a lot of flexibility, so we can make very lightweight papers, Bible paper, all the way up to cardboard, and specialty papers in between.
Yeah.
So we have our pulp in the tanks here that we're blending different fibers together to get the properties we want, and then we bring it forward to the forming section. We also have some chemical make down upstairs. We have 10 tanks. We can make different types of pigments or additives that we can add to the paper.
So you could add yellow and make yellow pages?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. And we could add waterproofing agents or grease-resistant agents and a number of things.
And all the young people listening right now are saying, what's a yellow page? Yellow pages. In a way, that's the point of today's show. We used to make yellow pages at paper mills in this state, but everything changes. You can make a lot more out of wood than just wood and just paper. Mike Bilodeau directs the Process Development Center at the University of Maine in Orono. There is an actual paper-making machine inside this building, and he's showing me how they make many of the new paper inventions that the center is churning out. There's a lot more to see and hear, so stand by. This is Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket. Welcome back to Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket. Put your safety glasses back on. We're inside the Process Development Center at the University of Maine, where Director Mike Bilodeau is showing me the future of paper. If you were getting depressed thinking the age of paper was over, think again. This particular paper machine is actually a hand-me-down from St. Regis paper. Before it became Champion paper, before that became International paper, before that became Verso paper, before that became a vacant lot.
So then we go through our what we call a head box. So we dilute the fibers way down. We put them onto a wire and drain the water from that slurry. This comes off. It starts out about 1% solids, 99% water. We'll end up about 20% solid. So it looks like a piece of wet newspaper or wet cardboard. Then it goes between two felts, and we squeeze those felts between two rolls, and we squeeze as much water out as we can. And then after that takes it up to about 45% solids. And after that, they go across these heated cans. So these rolls here are steam heated, and it evaporates the water from the mat. And by the time it leaves this section here, it's a fully dried piece of paper. We also have ability to put coatings on both sides of the paper using this device, and then we'll dry the coating, and then we wind it up at the reel.
I'm very impressed because you're able to experiment with a lot of different kinds of paper using all this experimental pulp.
Right. And it's a fee-for-service facility, so anybody's free to come and run trials on this. Try out their new material, try out their new product ideas.
Yeah. And are you actually selling this into the marketplace once you're
We
done?
don't sell the product, we just sell time on the machine.
All right.
And then we have a control system so we can see what's going on for properties. We have a scanner that measures the properties continuously, so we can measure how thick it is, we can measure how opaque it is, a number of other properties online. So once we've made the base paper, oftentimes to make higher value products or specialty products, you have to apply a coating. And we have a device over next door here that does that. So in this room we have what we call an off-machine coater, and we're able to apply different coatings on the surface of the paper using a number of different application methods. Once we apply the coating, we have a hot air dryer that impinges hot air on the coated surface and dries off the water or drives off the solvent, and we end up with a sheet that is fully coated. We can also laminate that to another sheet, so as like a postage stamp. We can make the postage stamp, and we can make the liner below it and apply the adhesive to both. So you can make the full composite. And it's another way of also making a very thick product. If it's going into a sheeting or a much thicker board, we can laminate 2 or 3 sheets together and make a thicker product. So another process we use to emboss or adjust the surface of the paper is what's called a calendar stack. And so this is a number of rolls. Some are steel, some are polymer, that we can heat to very high temperature. And we pass the sheet between those rolls, and with the heat and pressure, we can modify the surface of the paper. And that's how the glossy magazines, the car brochures, all the way to the matte reading papers.
We used to make a lot of coated paper. Now in Maine we don't.
Correct. Now we still make a fair amount, but we're making less. Less for printing and writing, but the same unit operations can be used to make papers that are used in other applications.
There seems to be a kayak made out of cardboard up there.
That's correct.
So you want to explain that?
Well, this was a student competition. So I think the team won $10,000 for the best kayak. But the paper was actually made on a pilot paper machine, and we made it obviously waterproof with the resins. They made up a kayak and raced down a river and beat the other student teams and won the competition. And then here in our labs we have the ability to make some smaller samples before we go to the larger pilot equipment, or we can take samples from commercial processes and help troubleshoot problems or evaluate new materials. And this allows us to make small pieces of product very rapidly and cost effectively.
So some of the samples you were showing me earlier?
Some of those we made here in the lab first. Some of them I showed you came off our pilot machine, and some of them were actually made on a commercial client's machine.
So who sits around thinking, what can I invent today?
Well, luckily for us, we have enough people calling us with ideas that a lot of them come from our clients. So we work with between 40 and 50 companies a year, and some of them we've been working with for 25 years. And it doesn't seem like a day goes by without somebody coming up with something to try, something to think about, and so it's always doing something different every day. So that's why we think that forest product. I think we're in a good position in the state of Maine, having the forest resources we do, that we can respond to these trends of more sustainable materials, more less toxic product.
It's the next generation. It's the future.
Yeah.
So, Mike Bilodeau, once again, I appreciate this tour. This was really eye-opening. I do feel like I saw the future.
Well, great. I appreciate the time.
And we're out of time. You've just heard a little piece of the future of wood. I'll be returning in the coming weeks to look at the fuels and chemical building blocks you can make and the incredible wood composites. Remember, this show and all previous shows are archived on the web at 929theticket.com. Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine is brought to you by Hammond Lumber, Napa Auto Parts, Doors Equipment, and EBS. We'll return next Saturday morning at 9 and Sunday morning at 8 on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket.